Hey everyone. You know how much we're all glued to our screens these days, right? And like reading on them too. I mean, like articles and stuff, but also full-on books.
Yeah, for sure.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into what all that screen time means for our brains.
Okay, sounds good.
We got this new research from Jordan, and it's like really fascinating. It looks at like the cognitive side of reading digitally.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty wild. It's honestly made me rethink my own e-reader habits a little bit.
Interesting. Well, this study goes beyond just asking, like, are ebooks good or bad, you know? It
Yeah.
actually looks at what's happening in our brains as we read words on a screen.
Right, exactly. So first off, this research was done in Jordan, and one of the first things that like really jumped out at me was how many people there are reading digitally every single day.
Oh,
It was a lot. Like 40% of the people in the study said they read digitally every day.
wow. That's a pretty significant portion of the population.
I know, right? Do you read digitally every day?
I do a lot of research,
Yep.
obviously, so
Yeah.
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 Yeah, me too.
Makes sense though, right? I mean, ebooks have just made reading so accessible.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got like basically a whole library just right there in our pocket.
Yeah,
You read anytime, anywhere. It's awesome.
totally. I've become like a total ebook convert myself just because it's so convenient.
Yeah, for sure.
But the research also found that not everybody is quite as in love with digital reading as we are.
That's true. Yeah. About 13% of the people in the study actually had negative feelings towards ebooks,
Wow.
and another 27% were neutral. So, yeah, it's definitely not like a universal love fest for ebooks.
Yeah, I can see that. Like some people, I totally get it. They love like the feeling of a physical book, right?
Right, the smell of the pages,
Exactly.
the weight of it in your hands.
Yeah, I actually still really enjoy that sometimes.
Yeah,
Like just the weight of a book, the turning of the pages.
for sure.
But I wonder, if those negative or neutral feelings actually affect how well people learn from digital reading. That's a really interesting question. And actually, it is something that the researchers looked at.
Oh, wow.
They studied how people process information when they're reading digitally and specifically how often they use metacognitive strategies.
Okay, can you break that down for me a little? What are metacognitive strategies?
Yeah, so like imagine you're reading a news article on your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a metacognitive reader would like maybe pause every so often and think like, wait, does this argument actually make sense?
Right.
How does this connect with what I already know about this topic? So they're basically thinking about their own thinking.
Oh, so it's like having like an inner fact checker kind of going on in your head while you're reading,
Exactly. Yeah.
making sure you're really understanding.
Yeah, totally.
That's interesting. Okay,
Oh.
so how does this all connect back to how people feel about ebooks?
So here's the thing, and it's kind of surprising, actually.
Okay.
The study found that people's attitudes towards ebooks, like whether they loved them, hated them, or felt neutral, was actually linked to how well they engaged with the material.
Interesting.
And it wasn't just their attitude either.
Oh.
How often they read and how long they read for also played a role.
Yeah.
And like all three of those factors were connected to better cognitive engagement.
So wait, are you saying that if someone enjoys reading on their e-reader,
Yeah.
they're actually more likely to like really think about what they're reading and make those connections?
That's what the research suggests. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, is it because like enjoying it helps them to focus better or something?
That's one possibility. Yeah.
Okay.
It could be that having a positive attitude just makes us more receptive to the information, or maybe it reduces distractions.
Mhm.
There's definitely more research that needs to be done to really understand the why behind this connection.
Yeah,
But it's definitely like a super fascinating avenue to explore.
it really is. It
Yeah.
makes you wonder, like, what if we could design e-reading experiences that actually amplify that enjoyment and engagement?
That's a great question, and it's something that we're going to explore more in part 2 of this deep dive.
Awesome. I can't wait.
We'll take a closer look at like the specific details of this research from Jordan and what those findings could mean for the future of reading itself.
Okay, cool.
So stay tuned.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. All right, so let's dive into some of the specifics of this research from Jordan. Remember those demographic tables we talked about?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They kind of give us like a snapshot of who participated in the study.
Right,
Right.
right. It was interesting to see the breakdown of age and education and all those daily reading habits we were talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. The study had like a good mix of people. Men and women were equally represented. Most of the participants were between like 26 and 35 years old. And while like the majority of them had an undergraduate degree, there were a good number of folks with higher degrees and professional certifications too.
Okay, so a pretty diverse group overall.
Yeah, for sure.
But we already know that like 40% of them are reading digitally every day.
Yeah.
So what else did the researchers learn about their reading habits?
Well, they found that the amount of time people spent reading varied quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some folks were only reading in like short bursts, maybe less than 30 minutes at a time,
Right.
while others were having much longer reading sessions, sometimes even for over an hour.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I know some days I only have time to, like, skim a few articles, and other days I can, like, totally get lost in a book for
Right,
hours.
exactly.
But what about those, those mixed feelings towards ebooks we talked about?
Yeah, the people who didn't love them.
Right. It's important to remember that while 60% of the participants had positive attitudes towards ebooks, there was still, a pretty significant chunk who didn't share that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
We talked about the 13% who had negative views, but even more than that, 27% had like neutral feelings about them. Huh. I'm curious about what might be driving those neutral or negative feelings. Do you think it's like a generational thing or maybe just resistance to new technology in general?
It's hard to say for sure based on this one study.
Yeah.
The researchers suggested that it could be a number of things, like
Yeah.
struggling to read on a screen, preferring the actual physical experience of holding a book,
Yeah.
or maybe even feeling like it's not real reading.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting to consider how those perceptions might be influencing people's experiences with digital reading, even if it's just like on a subconscious level.
I agree. Yeah. And it really kind of highlights the importance of individual
For
preferences.
sure.
Just because ebooks have become like super popular doesn't mean they work for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But for those who do enjoy reading digitally, it sounds like the convenience factor is a huge plus.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The study participants who expressed positive attitudes towards ebooks often cited things like the vast selection of titles available, the portability of e-readers,
Right.
and features like adjustable font sizes and built-in dictionaries.
It's true. I love being able to carry like hundreds of books around in my bag.
Yeah.
And being able to adjust the font size is a lifesaver, especially in like dim lighting.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But even with all those perks, the research suggests that convenience isn't always the deciding factor.
You got it. And that brings us back to that fascinating link between reading habits, attitudes, and cognitive engagement.
Right.
Remember.
Yeah, yeah. The researchers found a connection between how much people enjoyed reading on their e-readers and how deeply they engaged with the material.
Exactly. They found that people who read more often read for longer periods and had more positive attitudes towards ebooks were more likely to use those metacognitive strategies we talked about.
So the more they enjoyed it, the more they were like thinking critically about what they were reading,
Yeah.
making connections, really absorbing the information.
Precisely. It suggests that our emotional response to digital reading might actually be influencing how our brains process information.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful concept. It makes you wonder what implications this could have for things like education or even just how we design ebooks in the future.
And those are exactly the questions that we'll be exploring in the final part of this deep dive. We'll delve into the broader implications of this research and what it might mean for you, the listener, and how you approach digital reading.
Okay, so we're back and ready to like look at the bigger picture here. This research from Jordan is super fascinating, but like, what does it all actually mean for us?
Well, I think it really challenges us to rethink, how we approach digital reading. It's not just about like, consuming information. It's about engaging with it in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, right. It's like we've been so focused on the technology itself, like the e-readers and tablets and apps and all that,
Right.
that we haven't really stopped to think about like the actual cognitive processes that are happening in our brains.
Exactly. And this research, really highlights how important it is to understand those processes, especially as more and more of our reading moves online.
So like, where do we go from here? What can we actually do with this information?
Well, the authors of the study, they suggest a few interesting directions.
Okay.
For example, they talk about designing ebooks that are specifically optimized for cognitive engagement.
Oh, wow. What would that even look like? I'm trying to picture like e-readers with built-in features that like encourage us to think more deeply about what we're reading.
Yeah, exactly. Like imagine e-readers with interactive quizzes,
Oh, cool.
highlighting tools that prompt us to like summarize the key points or even spaces for personal reflections.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like taking those margin notes that we used to make in physical books, and bringing them into the digital world.
Yeah, I love that. It's about making digital reading a more active and engaging experience.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not just about the technology itself, it's also about how we use it. We need to be more mindful, I think, of our digital reading habits.
Yeah.
Maybe that means like turning off notifications, setting aside dedicated reading time, or even just experimenting with different font styles or screen brightness to find what works best for us.
Like, we need to treat digital reading with the same intentionality
Yeah.
that we would give to, like, reading a physical book.
Yeah.
It's not just mindless scrolling, you know?
Right.
It's an active process.
Absolutely. And think about the implications for education.
Oh, yeah.
As more and more learning materials move online, understanding how to optimize, for that cognitive engagement becomes really crucial.
So this research could actually help educators design online lessons and activities that are, like, actually engaging for students.
Yes.
Instead of just, like, taking traditional textbooks and digitizing them, we can create, like, truly interactive learning experiences.
Yes. Imagine classrooms where students are encouraged to interact with the text, ask questions, make connections, and personalize their learning using digital tools.
That's awesome. It's like we're moving away from just passively consuming information,
Right.
and towards, like, actively participating in the learning process.
And that's the ultimate goal, right? To empower learners to become active participants in their own education.
Totally.
But it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Right.
This study, really highlighted how much our individual preferences influence our experience with digital reading.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to make their own digital reading experience more positive and engaging?
I think it starts with self-awareness. Pay attention to how you feel when you're reading on a screen.
Okay.
Are you easily distracted?
Right.
Do you find yourself like skimming rather than really digging into the material?
Yeah.
Once you kind of understand your own tendencies, then you can start experimenting with different strategies.
Okay, cool. So try different e-reader apps, adjust the font size, find a quiet reading space, maybe even set a timer to help you stay focused.
Exactly.
It's all about finding what works best for you.
And remember, this is an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
The world of digital reading is constantly evolving, and so are we. The more we understand about how our brains engage with digital text, the better equipped we'll be to create a reading experience that's both enjoyable and enriching.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of your digital brain.
It was a good one.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on your own digital reading habits and inspired you to think a little more critically about how you engage with information online. Until next time, keep those minds curious.